Hey people, I thought I would make a video showing the beginnings of a first edition book collection and talk a little bit about how I got into it and what my future plans are. So I've always been a big reader, but I've also always been really into technology, and I always figured I'd just get into kind of, Kindle and things like that eventually, digital books, and I wouldn't care about physical books anymore. But I kind of found what happened is the opposite, which is that I become more interested in books as I've gotten older and into my 30s, and fairly recently decided to collect them. And as most people that collect books for kind of value purposes do, I collect first editions now. I'm a brand new collector of first editions, and I decided to kind of I read a lot on it, and really the advice people give is to collect things that you love, things from your childhood, rather than worrying directly about value, unless you're going to actually be a bookseller or something like that. So I just got this bookcase. I wanted a bookcase that was appropriate to put, to protect and store first editions in. And I've read varying things. I've read that you're not supposed to use wood bookshelves. Let's take a look here. I wanted something that would close because I used to store video game boxes in kind of a cabinet like this, and I had old Commodore and Nintendo boxes in there for decades, and they're like brand new when you open up the cabinet. They haven't been faded, dusted, molded, anything. These kind of cabinets actually protect really well. One thing I put in here is this baking soda. Anybody who's bought new furniture knows that new wood furniture has a lot of fumes from treating the wood. This actually has less than most furniture I've seen. There's actually not much of a smell to it, which I was surprised at, but I'm going to leave this in here, or I'm going to replace the box, but I'm going to have baking soda in there for about a year while the fumes kind of dissipate. One thing that's cool about this, I didn't realize till after I bought it, is that the shelves are actually glass and wood. So actually, one of the bad parts is having your books touch the, especially newly treated wood. But apparently, as long as they're not touching it, and the fumes aren't terrible, which they shouldn't be with baking soda in there all the time, it should be pretty good on this glass. So anyway, I grew up in the 80s, and the books of my childhood were books from the 80s. So that's one of the major things I wanted to collect. Picture books from the 80s. In my had a library class in grade school and middle school, and the librarians, as most librarians are, were really big into Caldecott and Newbery Award winners, so I was really interested in those. So my favorite artist of the 80s, and I'm not the only one, and he's hugely famous, is Chris Van Allsburg. So I knew that was going to be one of my focuses. So I don't want to go too far into detail and bore you all to death, but basically the general gist of my collection is going to be is Newbery and Caldecott winners, focusing on the 70s and 80s and 90s first, and then filling in kind of around that as I see fit. And also, I'm a really huge fan of Jon Klassen, who's a more recent illustrator who won the Caldecott. So secondary, beyond Caldecott and Newbery winners and honors. Another focus of mine is going to be collecting all Jon Klassen illustrated stuff. Thirdly, just some random other stuff that I either like recently, has been recommended to me, etc. So really, there's several different areas, mostly children's picture books and literature, and all first editions, signed when possible, find when possible, near fine, as best I can find that isn't going to absolutely kill me. So let me take a look at what we've got so far. I'm sure anyone looking at this will know some of these items. So I'm not going to do them in the order I bought them in. I'm just going to do them in kind of whatever order I want. So this is the Weston game, Ellen Raskin. Newbery Award winner in 1979. A very popular book with my age group. A mystery, a fairly complex mystery for the age group, but it's a very well-loved book. And this is actually, I think, one of the most incredible dust jacket covers of the 70s in any book. Had to have it. This is a very fine copy signed by Ellen Raskin. I'm not going to show the copyright pages to all these. I can show them if they're requested, but you can trust me that they're all first editions. The second one is Jim Howe's Bunnicula. I actually didn't have most of these books that I'm going to be collecting. I never had first editions. I had some later ones. The Weston game I had as maybe a third grader, was a paperback copy with kind of some photographic pictures of the characters and a pretty terrible cover. This one absolutely dominates it. And the same thing with Bunnicula. I had the paperbacks of this series, so it's really cool to have a first edition of this. I never actually even saw it until I went looking online for them. This is one of the only ones I have that has a contemporary signature. Now, Ellen Raskin died in 1984, so that's clearly a fairly old signature, probably within a few years after, that's not dated. But this Bunnicula copy, if you can see, is published by Athenaeum, and it has this really strange end papers that look like they have the fiber of the paper looks like it has paint on them. I don't know what that is, but that's just a style, I guess. Anyway, this is the only book I have that has a contemporary inscription from the author, James Howe. This is inscribed to Dory and Joy, and it looks like there's a little Hebrew or something there. And the date 9/28/79, 1979 is the year that this book came out. These were two that I absolutely, had to have. They were two of my favorite childhood books. These are in amazing condition. Really bright. The other kind of one of the trio that I really want, that I'm actually looking at a copy right now, is a E.L. Koenigsberg from the Mixed Up Files of Mrs. Basil E. Frank Wheeler, and that was a late 60s Newbery winner, also one of my favorites as a kid. I'm also going to go over what I paid for these, because I don't think there's any reason in being secretive about it, because people that want to collect books want to collect anything, want to know how much it would cost them to buy things like this. So I will tell you if I can recall them all. Um, I want to say that the Bunnicula was about 600 and something dollars, and the Weston game was maybe $500. Um, now, more older books. Three of kind of my most prized at the moment are these three Chris Van Allsburg books. So, The Garden of Abdul Gasazi is Chris's first book. It's also from 1979, and he won the Caldecott Honor for it, not the medal, which he won twice later, but honor. This dust jacket is absolutely in incredible condition for being that old. You can see it signed there. Not dated, not sure when the signature is. I think it's actually a fairly recent signature. But if you look these up, a lot of times you'll find them, anywhere from, $600 in kind of shitty, good or presentable condition to $2,000 sometimes. I actually got this from a seller who sold the whole library of an ALA librarian who had collected his books, and I think this is maybe the last one he had left. But it was, it looks brand new, really. It's incredible. And I paid $800 for that, which I'd bought another one not that long before, and it ended up having a ton of condition issues, and it was actually way more expensive than that. It was more like $1,400, and I sent it back. Another one, probably my favorite of his, although it didn't win any awards, is The Mysteries of Harris Burdick. Incredible book. I'm not going to go over what the book is. If you don't know it, you really should. This is signed by him in 2011. Like I said, also first edition from 1984. And that one is absolutely in perfect condition. In fact, I almost questioned if the dust jacket is so good and so new that I almost questioned whether or not it was a facsimile jacket, which is a fake jacket printed from a scan of the jacket that's been perfected and then turned into a jacket. But I think that one's legit. The other third Chris Van Allsburg I have is the Polar Express, which did win a Caldecott in 1986. Probably his most famous book, most beloved book. This is also in absolutely pristine condition. One cool thing about this one, you can see on the front end paper, it's signed with a little bell with a musical note coming out of it by Chris. And this is actually a contemporary inscription from 1986 when the book was released. The only one I've ever seen with a contemporary inscription. So, I still don't have Jumanji yet. I cannot find a really, really good signed copy of it yet. But that Polar Express, it was one of the first things I bought, and I kind of hadn't done tons of research yet, and I was like, oh, I just gotta have it. I have some money right now, and I paid $1,500 for it. Since then, I haven't really seen any, contemporary inscribed copies, let alone for less than that. I've seen copies of this quality for 2,000. I've seen 1,800. I've seen 1,200. So I don't think it was actually too bad a price to pay for it. But it is the most I've spent on a book so far. Down to the Jon Klassen section here. At first I decided I was just going to get his books, but then I was like, oh, you know what? I'm just going to get everything he's ever illustrated, including just covers. I'm not going to bother showing it. He's a very recent illustrator. It's not that hard to get these. All of these Jon Klassen first editions are from the past 3, 4, 5 years, and they were all between, $50 and $100 each. So if you like Jon Klassen, it's pretty easy to get signed first editions of him. He does a lot of signings. So Extra Yarn actually was the most expensive one. That was $100. I'm not going to show all these signatures. Some of them have little doodles in them by him, which is nice. Some are signed by the author too, which I don't particularly care about because I'm more for the illustrator. Extra Yarn is a not very well known one of his, but pretty cool. This Is Not My Hat is the one he won the Caldecott for. This cover's not actually messed up. It's just the broad art cover is kind of weird looking. Sam and Dave Dig a Hole, I think was a Caldecott Honor winner this past year. House Held Up by Trees is an incredibly illustrated book. It's probably my favorite illustrated book other than Van Allsburg books. Highly recommend it. He also illustrated a Lemony Snicket book called The Dark. These are all in like new condition basically. That one's actually really interesting drawings. And then I Want My Hat Back was the, I guess, prequel, you would say, to the one that won, which I already forgot the name of. It's like always at the tip of my tongue and then I forget it. This Is Not My Hat. This was the prequel to it. This one did very well also with critics and kind of put Jon Klassen on the map. That was his first book. These are all signed. So like I said, I wanted to get stuff he illustrated, even if it was just covers and that weren't picture books. So the most recent one I got was Vanished by Sheila Chari, which kind of hard to tell with the but this is a really incredible piece of cover artwork, and he did some illustrations inside of it, but not much. It's not a picture book, it's a novel. So that's that. So the last two things, I just wanted to get first editions of my favorite books, period. The first one is called The Zanzibar Chest by Aidan Hartley. He was a reporter for Reuters. I don't know if he still is, but he used to cover, really terrible places, Iraq. Actually, no, I'm not sure if he's in Iraq, but Somalia, Rwanda, just all the terrible places in the early 90s, mid 90s. He was originally born in Kenya, and this book is kind of chronicles his time in these terrible African countries, kind of mixed with biography about his father. His father was, part of the British rule in colonial Africa, and how, he used to tell Aidan how much they screwed up the country, and he was kind of, seeing the result of that. It's an absolutely mind-blowing book. Absolutely incredible. Like it's you almost can't believe that the things he's talking about happened. Like some people have accused him of making some of it up or whatever because it reads like fiction. Anyway, this is my favorite book, so I had to have a first edition of it signed. Not hard to get. Not super easy to get either, but not that hard to get. It was like the Economist Book of the Year. I think one year it went through several printings. The other book, if I had to pick, my second favorite book is Tony Horwitz's Blue Latitudes. He's more known for the book he did earlier, Confederates in the Attic, about Civil War reenactors, among other things. But this is his book about Captain Cook, and he kind of traces the points that Captain Cook visited in the world in the present day, and kind of sees if there's any kind of residual interest or things like that related to Cook in these places still. And kind of, it's really just it's incredible. It kind of intertwines him visiting there with the history. So anyway, those are my two favorite books, adult books, and figured if I'm going to collect what I love, those would be first on the list. The Elegant Cockroach is a book, there's a list of the most beautiful picture books ever made, and this was on it. I gotta say, it's kind of cool looking, but it's not that great. Actually, I thought the story was pretty terrible, actually. It was made by Uppercase, who's they make a magazine about printmaking and stuff like that. That's pretty awesome. And they made one edition of this book. It's interestingly illustrated, but not great. Not an interesting story. Not an interesting book. Anyway, that's the start of my collection. I don't have much more Klassen to collect. He did some covers for The Incorrigible Children of Ashton Place, one of those kind of ridiculous multi-book series where he did covers and some internal illustrations. Those were kind of hard to get the first editions of. I haven't seen a ton of them around. He also did The Witch's Boy. He did a book called The Watch That Ends the Night, which I'm also looking for a copy of. And he did another one coming out by Kenneth Oppel called The Nest, which is supposed to be an amazing children's book. Anyway, sorry that was kind of long-winded, but this collection will grow and grow and grow. 14 books I've purchased so far, first editions. They're all signed other than The Elegant Cockroach and Vanished, Vanished was only about $10. It's not a known book at all, and he only did the cover, so it doesn't really have much intrinsic value, but I thought the cover was amazing. Elegant Cockroach was like $10 or $12. That's a new book. But all 14 of the books together, so far I have spent $4,200. And then, I wanted a nice cabinet for it, and the cabinet was $1,000. So $5,200 is what I've spent so far. I have my eye on some Caldecott winners, collecting the 80s first, so I have my eye on a copy of Glorious Flight and some others, Fables, Arnold Lobel's Fables and stuff like that. Anyway, I will do another video when I have more of the collection and talk about some other things about collecting and what I paid for the new ones and kind of anything else I've learned along the way. So I'd be really interested in any of you guys posting your videos about your collections. There's almost nothing on YouTube about it. I can only guess that I'm one of the only crazy people that does this anymore. That's not a 60-year-old man. So it'd be great to see somebody else's collection. So definitely post a video about yours. All right, bye.